Hi everyone, welcome to the new part of this series. In the series of collections, we are learning about the array. In the previous part, we learned about the single dimension array, where we learned how can we create, declare, initialize and work with single dimension array. Now it's time to learn about the multi-dimensional array. Let's start. Let's have a look what we are going to learn in this video. We will be learning what are multi-dimensional array. What are the dimensions? If we are talking about the multi-dimensional, so suppose I'm saying one dimension, I'm saying two dimension. So what actually are the dimensions that we are going to learn in this video? What is the need of multi-dimensional array? It means what type of data you are going to store in your multi-dimensional array, that we will be learning. How to work with 2D array. How can we initialize a 2D array? And the meaning of D is dimension. So if I'm saying 2D, it means two dimension. So it means how to initialize a two-dimensional array, how to assign values in a two-dimension array, how to get values from the 2D array, how to set values in 2D array. Further, how to work with more than 2D array. So if we are talking about the multi-dimensional, then there are possibilities that the dimensions may be more than 2. It may be 3, 4 as per your requirement. How to calculate the dimensions of an array. So suppose you already have an array and you don't know how many dimensions are there in that particular array. So we will be learning how can you calculate those dimensions, and a lot of things you are going to learn in this video. First of all, let's have a look what are the dimensions. In general, we have three axes. So if we talk about the mathematically, we have three axes. What axes? X, Y, Z. So these three axes are available, which we have already learned in the mathematics. 1D has only one dimension, which is x. So if something is represented only on the x-axis, then it has only one dimension. If to represent something you need two dimensions, x and y, then we will say that that particular thing has two dimensions. For the 3D, it means for the three-dimensional, we need three axes x, y, z. These three axes are required to represent a three-dimensional thing. Here on the right side there is a graph which represents x, y and z axis. Now let's have a look what type of data we are going to store in multi-dimensional array. Suppose if you have to store a single variable, you will simply create a variable like this and you will assign the values to that particular variable. If you store few number of records into something, then you can create single dimension array and you can assign those values to that particular array that we have already learned in the previous part of this video. Now if you have something like this, you have a table and you have to store all the columns and rows of a table into something. What will you do? There may be one more example like this. Here the number of rows are more than the number of columns and you have to store this type of data into something. What will you do? Even more complex example, if you have something like this. So these first two tables represent two dimension, x and y axis, and the third image, this represent three dimensions, x, y, z. If you need to store your data like this, you have to declare something, you have to do something, and the answer is multi-dimensions. So to work with this type of data, you have to create multi-dimensional array. If you have to work with these two examples for the table, then we will work with 2D array because it has only two dimensions, x and y. Further, if we have to work with the cube, then we have to work in the three dimensions. Since we are talking about the array, then the important concept in array is index. So in the previous part we learned how to fetch values based on the index from an array. Now we have to work with multi dimensions. It means we have to work with 2D or 3D array Let's have a look on the concept of index. So suppose I have this table, and this table has 3 rows and 3 columns. The values in the table is 1, 2, 3, and similarly up to 9. Now if we need to work with the index, then we have to focus two index in mind, one for x and one for y. So, and you already know that the index in an array starts from 0. So the first index for the x and y will be 0, 0. So if you need to work with the first value, then you have to use 0, 0 index. Now we are talking about the first row and the second column. In the index wise, the first row will be 0 index, then the next row will have 1 index, and then the next row will have the second index. Similarly, if we talk about the columns, the first column will be having 0 index, the first column will be having 1 index, and then the third column will be having the second index. So you can combine those x and y axis, the value of the index from row and column, and you will get the index for all the table. Okay, so first there will be row and then there will be column. So row, comma, column. That's how you can create an index for a particular table. So suppose I have to find out the index of this box which has value 5. This is the second row. And what is the index for the second? 1. And also if we talk from the column side, this is also the second column. And the index of the second column is also 1. That's why the index of this box is 1, 1. Let's have a look on the value 8. The row number is third, that's why the index is second for this row, and column is 1, that's why the index of this particular element or box is 2, 1. That's how you have to think, you have to work about the index in an multi-dimension array. Now it's time to create a demo and let's see all the things in practical way. For that I have to create a new project. So we are working with the .NET Core. So I'm creating a new console application, .NET new console, and let's give it a name. Okay, let's press enter. So it will create a new console application inside my Explorer. Let's open the code in the Visual Studio Code, which is our editor, and to open it we can write code space dot and press enter. So here you will see we have a very basic program which has only a program class, and inside that program class there is a main method. And you already know from the previous part of this video that an array contains only similar type of data. It means all the members of the array will be of same type. They may be string, that may be integer, that may be decimal, or that may be any other type which is available inside the .NET. So suppose I'm working with the integer now and I have to create 2D array. Before that, let's learn about the syntax of one dimension array. So int square bracket, and suppose I have to write here numbers. That's how we can declare a one dimension array. If you need to make it multi-dimension or two dimension, then all you have to do is you have to apply comma. What? Comma. Where? Here inside this square bracket, comma. Now it has two dimension. One is before the comma and second is after the comma. That's how we can decide the dimensions of an array. Now we have declared a 2D array, and now it's time to initialize it. So we can simply assign it equal to new int square bracket, and we have to provide how many rows we are going to have inside this array. So suppose I'm going to have 3 rows, and then we have to provide the number of columns for this array. So suppose I'll be having only 2 columns. So basically I'm creating a table which will have 3 rows and 2 columns. So that's how you can declare your multi-dimension or 2-dimension array. Okay, after declaring it, we have to set few values inside this array. How can we do that? Let's see. It is very clear from the previous part that if you are working with the array, you have to work with the index. With the help of index, we can set the values. Also, we can get the values. How? Numbers. And what will be the index for the first column? 0 comma 0, because first row and first column 0 comma 0, 0 comma 0, and let's assign a value here 1. Okay, that's how we can insert a value inside our first box. Okay, let's assign few more values. So suppose I have assigned values for 2 rows, and in the third rows I haven't assigned anything. And now let's test how it will work. So I'll put a breakpoint here and I'll press F5. For that I have to choose the environment, which is .NET Core. It is going to add the configurations. Let's have a look on the array. So I'm putting my cursor over here and you can see the details of this array is available in the IntelliSense. What is the size of this array? Here you can see the size is 3, 2. It means 3 row and the 2 columns. Now let's have a look on the values. The first column and the first row has all the values which we have provided. In the third row, index 2, 0 and 2, 1 both have the default value of the type integer which we have already provided. If you will not assign any value, then the default value of the type will automatically be inserted at the time of initialization. This is the first way to insert the values. If you need to print the values on the console, you can simply use the same syntax. What is that? Numbers, then square bracket, and suppose I'm going to print only one value here, and if I press F5, let me remove this breakpoint. Here you can see on the console screen I have value 4, which is against 1, 1. So that's how you can print the values. You can fetch the values from the array using the index. Now let's see another ways to assign the values. So instead of doing all these things, we can simply do it here. Okay, so and now focus on the data which I'm going to insert. So this is the curly braces for the entire array, and now in this entire array we have to insert values row wise. So first we will insert for the first row, then second row, then third row. Okay, so to insert value for the first row, we have to create one more curly braces over here, and I have to write the values. So 1, 2. It means the value for the 0, 0 index is 1, and for the 0, 1 is 2. To create the second row, I can do it 3, 4, and to create the third row, I can do it 5, 6. That's how you can assign the values to your array when you are initializing it. Okay, now simply you can do it like this: console.writeLine numbers 1, 1, and let's see what will be the output. If I press F5 once more, simply you can see that the output is 4 over here on the console screen. Also we can put a breakpoint and test one more time. Let's press F5. Here you can see all the data is available at a particular index. For the first 0, 0, it means the first row, first column, second value, first row, second column, then similarly second row, first column, second row, second column, and third row, first column, third row, second column. There is one more way. If you are assigning values directly to the number while you are declaring it, you don't have to specify these things. Okay. All the dimensions will be calculated automatically from the values. If you are putting only these values, suppose now I'm using only these values, and here you can see that I'm using 2 row and 2 column, then automatically the size of the number will be 2, 2. Let's put a breakpoint and press F5. So you can see the size is 2 comma 2. So the size will be calculated automatically from the values. And if you are assigning values directly when you are declaring your array, then you don't have to do this also. You can remove this one part and simply you can write the values. I press F5 again. You can see we have an array of 2 comma 2 size and we have all the values from that array. If you need to increase the values like this, then you can increase the value also 5 comma 6 and you will see all the values are there in the array. Now the size should be 3 comma 2, which is here 3 comma 2. Fine, great. Let's try to learn how can we replace a particular value from the array. Suppose I'm printing the value of 1 comma 1, but what is the current value of 1 comma 1? It is 4. I want to replace this value. Okay, so to replace this value, simply we can use the index part, and suppose I want to make it 40. Okay, initially the value was 4. Now I have to update the value for some reason, and now I'm printing the value to validate whether it is working or not. Let's press F5. Yes, great, it is working. The value on the console is 40. That's how you can validate your value. So these are the basic fundamentals of the 2D array. How can we initialize and declare it? Now it's time to read the values from the array. Before that, we have to learn how to find out the number of rows and number of columns inside this array. So suppose I have to find out the number of rows, int number of rows. This is what I want to know from this array. Okay, and for that we can write numbers dot get length. There is a method get length. Inside this method you can pass a value. What is the value? Before that, let's have a look on the get length method. If I press F12 over here, you will see it has some details available here. So a zero-based dimension of the system.array whose length needs to be determined. We have to pass the dimension for which we have to find out the length. Suppose I have to find out the length of the row, and we can see that the row is available on the x-axis and the index for the x is 0. For the y it is 1 and for z it is 2. So suppose if you need to find out the number of rows, then you have to pass 0 over here. Okay, let's put a breakpoint here, and if I press F5, we can see 3 is available in the IntelliSense. So number of rows has 3, which is correct because our array has 3 rows. If we need to find out the number of columns inside this array, how can we do that? So number of columns, we have to pass here 1. 0 is for the row and 1 is for the column. Now let's press F5 and let's see the output. In number of rows we have 3 and in number of columns we have 2, which is great. Okay, so why we are calculating these values? These values are very much important while we have to print the values. So suppose I want to print the table in the tabular format on my console screen. Let's see how to do that. For that I have to use for loop, and inside the for loop I'll be running my loop for the rows, number of rows, and we have to use one more loop. So we have to create one more inside loop inside this for loop, and now we have to use the j because I is already there in the upper loop. Now we have to use number of columns, and here we can simply print the values. So you will see that the first for loop will work from 0 to 3 because we have 3 rows, 0, 1, 2, because the condition is I should be less than number of rows. So number of rows are 3. So our loop will work from 0, 1, 2, which will give our index of the rows. And the internal for loop will work from j, which is 0, to number of columns, which is 2. So it will work for 0, 1, which will give us the index of the column. By combining both of them, we can fetch the values from our array. Console dot write. I'm not using write line because right line will move the cursor in the next line while print only one values. Now we have to print the values in the same row. So to print the values we can use numbers, and in the square bracket we can write I comma j. To make it more clear, let's add something over here. So I'm using backslash t, which will give us the space for the t, and once we will print the values from one particular row, we have to go to the next line, and to go to the next line we can simply write console dot write line and the blank. Okay, and now let's press F5. So here you can see we have a beautiful table available. In the first row we have 0, 2. In the first row we have 1, 2, which is correct. In the second row we have 3, 4, which is also correct. And in the third row we have 5, 6, which is also correct. Okay, this is how you can print values from your two-dimensional array using for loop. Now if I want to get these values from the user, suppose I do not want to hardcode these values, I want to get these values from the user. How can we do that? So for that I have to declare a array first here. So new int, and suppose I'm printing the values for 3, 2. Cool. And let me remove these values from here. Okay, to get these values I have to, so directly here for number of rows I can write this value, and for the number of columns I can write directly this value. By doing this I don't have to write these two lines. And so this is the declaration of the array, and this is the logic to print the values on the console. Before that we have to read the values from the console, and we have to assign those values to the array. So for that we have to use these two for loops. So I'm writing it again, and here instead of printing the values, first I have to print a message console dot write line, please enter a value for index, and we have to write down the index I comma j, and to make it variable we have to use dollar at the beginning. So this is how we will show the message. And now we have to read the values, numbers I comma j. We will assign the value to this particular index, and you know how to read the value from the console. So there is a method console dot read. This will allow to read the value from the console screen, and because the type of the value will be a string, if you are reading anything from the console we have to convert it to the integer. So to convert it directly we will be using convert dot to int. So this is the method to convert the values string value to the integer. That's how you can write the logic to read the values from the console. And now it's time to read the values in practical way. So before that I have to do some modifications in the launch.json, which is available over here, launch.json, because in the Visual Studio Code while working with .NET Core there is some problem in the debugging console. So instead of using internal console I'll be using integrated terminal to read the values. Okay, and now let's press F5 and let's read all the values from the terminal. To open the terminal you can simply click on this part, terminal. If you are working with Visual Studio then you don't have to make any changes and everything will work from that console. So if I'm clicking here on the console you can see first message, which is please enter a value for index 0, 0. So I have to enter a value. Suppose the value is 1. If I press enter again then it will ask me to enter a value for 0, 1 index. Suppose the value is 2 now. If I press enter once more you will see the next message. Let's enter the values 2, 0. Suppose it is 5. And for the 6 let's see the value is 6. And at the last, because we have a logic to print the values from the entire array, here you will see all the values are available here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's how you can read the values from the console and you can simply display those values on the console. Important point, How to calculate number of rows? So using the getLength method, you can apply getLength on the array.getLength, and you have to pass the dimension. For the row you have to pass 0, for the column you have to pass 1, and for the height or the third axis you can pass 2. Number of rows. Fine. Get array elements from the user, that we have already learned from here. Print array elements, that also we have already learned here. So this was all about the 2-dimension array. What about the 3 dimensions? If you have to work with the 3 dimensions, then how can you work with that? So for that, let's remove this part and let's declare one more array, int. So instead of writing 1 comma, we have to write 2 commas over here. So first for x, y, z. Before this first comma, the value will be x. After the first comma and before the second comma, the value will be y, and at the last the value for z. And suppose the array is 3D, we have to initialize it, new int, suppose 3 comma 3 comma 3. So that's how you can declare your 3-dimensional array. So now we have values for x, y, and z. You can simply assign the values using the index 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, like that. So you have to assign your values using the index, and you can simply assign the value just like we have done for the 2-dimensional array. Here you have to use the 3 dimensions instead of 2. Let's create an example of the 3-dimensional array. So here instead of using 1 comma, we have to use 2 commas, and while declaring it we can also use 2 commas, and then we can provide the values. So you can see instead of writing 2 values, now I'm writing 3 values because of the index. So x, y, z, this value is for the 0, 0, 0, this is for the 0, 0, 1, and this is for the 0, 0, 2. This value represents the row, this is the column, and this is the height or the z-axis, x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. That's how you can write your logic for the 3-dimensional array. Now one more concept. How can you identify the dimension of an array? So suppose I have 1D array, I have 2D array, and I have 3D array. And let's create a 1D array here. So int and 1D, and suppose let's just initialize it 4. Okay, and let's do all the things here also. So suppose it is 3 comma 3 comma 3. So now we have 3 arrays. One is of the 1 dimension, this is for the 2nd dimension, and this is of the 3rd dimension. If you need to find out the number of dimensions using some method, inside this array there is a property which is called rank. The rank represents the number of dimensions for a particular array. How to calculate that? So where dimension is equal to n1d dot rank, and that's it. This represents the number of dimensions. Here you can see the rank, number of dimensions of the system dot array. Okay, if I put a breakpoint over here and if I press F5, you can see the dimension of the first array is 1. Similarly, we can calculate the dimensions of the 2nd and 3rd array also. The important point is that we have to learn about the rank property of the array. So for the first array it is 1, for the 2nd array it is 2, and for the 3rd array it is 3 because of the dimensions. That's how you can calculate the dimensions or the rank of the array dynamically. That's all in this part. Thank you for watching. Have a great day, and don't forget to hit the like button. Please tell me your feedback in the comment section. Share this video, subscribe the channel. Thank you for watching.